Welcome back to Anatomy and Physiology. This is Chapter 10, Part 2. We're on video 12. The rest of this chapter is going to be focused on how smooth muscle functions and how it differs from skeletal muscle, which is what the rest or the first part of this whole unit was. So, we're going to talk about the types of smooth muscle. And remember, smooth muscle is involuntary, which means that we don't have voluntary control over it. So the first type of smooth muscle is called visceral. This is located in the walls of organs, and that would be in the digestive, urinary, and reproductive systems. And this usually occurs in sheets. So in the walls of the organs, it forms that wall. And it acts like one unit with waves of contraction. So when we think of food being propelled through the esophagus, in the stomach, small intestine, large intestine, it's going to be this acting as one unit. And excuse me, the wave of contraction starts in one area, and if we're talking about the large intestine, pushes the fecal matter through the large intestine, kind of like putting your hand at the end of the toothpaste tube and squeezing and then moving it down along, everything comes out the other end. That's how this muscle works. This muscle is also called USM muscle, which stands for unitary smooth muscle, since it acts like a unit. There are numerous gap junctions. Remember that gap junctions allow messages between the cells to travel. So these allow action potentials to pass from cell to cell. So that means that it can act like a unit. The other type of smooth muscle is MSM, which stands for multi-unit smooth muscle. Here we have groups of cells acting independently with fewer gap junctions. So we can have sections or groups of cells acting independently from one another. And we can end up with small sheets, which might be a particular area of an arteriole, which is a little artery. So not the entire arteriole, but one section of it. So we can stop blood flow to an area or limit it. Maybe you have severed an artery and your body wants to contract that artery so less blood is lost. We can have bundles of cells, and that would be things like the iris of the eye or the arrector pili muscles of the skin and hair follicle. Or we can have single cells like in the capsules of the spleen. So there's a lot of variety with multi-unit smooth muscle. Now, smooth muscle contraction is generated by different things. Because this is involuntary, we have to have different triggers for it. We can't just say, okay, I'm going to move food through my esophagus. It doesn't work like that. So with MSM, it can be stimulated by nerves, hormones, or other chemical substances. in the body. So with this, we have the generation of other nervous systems that help control this. Smooth muscle. So this is not a motor neuron. These are going to be things like the autonomic nervous system, which we talked about earlier in a previous chapter. USM is the same as MSM, but also we could have external stimulation. So, for example, once food, the bolus of food that is chewed up reaches the back of the throat, there's a mechanical trigger that causes waves of motion of the esophagus. So we automatically swallow when things touch that. That's external stimulation. We also have I cannot spell today. Rhythmic stimulation. So this is based on a slow depolarization that generates spontaneous action potentials at intervals. So in both of these, we rely on the autonomic nervous system. So in the USM, axons release neurotransmitters into an area, and we rely on diffusion over the cells. So it's like bathing all those cells in an area. So instead of having that motor end plate, it just kind of spreads out over the whole thing. So the whole unit contracts as one. With MSM, it is similar to skeletal muscle and how it functions. So we end up with the axon going in and the presynaptic terminal synapsing with a particular area instead of releasing it over an entire sheath of muscle.